trickle in. Welcome, everyone. I'm Caroline Elliott. I'm the Executive Director of the Cadence River Education Alliance. Just a little housekeeping, please mute your audio if you haven't already. And if you have issues with the quality of the video at any point, sometimes if you turn off your video, that frees up some bandwidth for better quality. And you can find that at the bottom left of your screen, at least in most cases, I think. And we'll handle questions at the end, but along the way, if you have questions and you want to make sure that you remember them, you're welcome to put them in the chat box, and we'll handle those at the end. So I just want to say a quick word about what's going on, what other things are going on at CREA. We've started back up with some in-person programming and small guided walks with a maximum of 10 people. And there's one coming up. We actually have one tomorrow, but that's fully subscribed already. And we have one looking for the green. That's basically looking for what's greening up in spring. That's on Monday at 10 at the Preserve. And next month in May, our speaker is going to be Derek Yorks he's a wildlife biologist with Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and he'll be talking about turtles. We also have, I haven't listed here, a number of programs going out. We have a birding program for beginners that actually also is hosted by a Bowdoin student, Brendan Murtha. He's going to be focusing on sort of basic bird ID, understanding what you see and hear. That's going to be May 19th at 10. Oh, no, sorry, that's May 8th, which is a Saturday morning at 7 a.m. We have a mindfulness in nature walk on May 19th at 10. That's a Wednesday, I think. And I hope to soon be starting up some Friday, a weekly Friday walk after lunch. But for any of those things, you can check the events page of our website for all of those things to get more information and to register. And I just want to say that we love doing these programs and providing this service to the community. And we're incredibly grateful to our members who make it possible. And we always need new members. New members keep us strong and keep the hands-on nature-based experiences that we provide in the community. And we're always interested in hearing your ideas about speakers and topics that you'd like to hear. So you're always welcome to send those along to me, or you can send them to CREA@creamaine.org. And just a few other fun notes. Our summer camp is fully subscribed. We don't think that's ever happened before, which is really exciting news. Just huge enthusiasm for the experience that we provide, which is a full nature immersion, fully outdoors camp. Anyway, so we're really excited about providing that experience to all the youngsters who've been spending a lot of time indoors and at home this past year. So let's get to the program. So I'm really excited about this program because it accomplishes two goals that are important to us. One is to lift up the voices of young people who really are the future, and it also advances the ongoing conversations that we're having about how to manage the changing climate. And so being able to do those two things at once is just a real joy. And I have to thank Eileen Johnson, who's director of the Environmental Studies program at Bowdoin. When I approached her a while back to ask her about good speakers on climate, she said, the students are really doing some pretty impressive work. And so she connected us with these 5 students, Lauren, Nick, Lily, Matt, and Beckett. And, for those of us whose college days are far behind us, it's pretty amazing to see what kind of work these students are doing today. This is not the academia that I remember. It's really applied learning at its best. And anyone who knows Eileen knows that she is she is a powerful force in that regard. She is really does an amazing job at finding ways for students to get out into the community and do meaningful work on important, really critical environmental issues, while also having the benefit of learning to navigate in the real world that we so often talk about to college students. So a huge thank you to Matt, Beckett, Lily, Lauren, and Nick for adding this presentation to what I imagine is a pretty full complement of coursework. And I hope you, our audience, will appreciate both their passion for the work and the talents that they bring to it. So I'm going to unshare my screen and let Lauren, or no, who's starting? Let me get you up, Lauren. There we go. So Lauren is going to be our student moderator, and she's going to sort of drive the truck from going forward. So Lauren, take it away.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. It was a beautiful day in Maine today. It was hard, like Caroline said, to come inside at dinner outside in the quad, which was amazing. So like Caroline said, I'll be the moderator today, but for the most part, each of us five will be speaking our own parts. And so we just want to do brief introductions to start, and then we'll get into the work that we've been doing in Maine. So I'm Lauren Cafe. I use she, her, hers, and I'm originally from Illinois, but currently on campus in Brunswick right now. And I'll pass the mic off to Nick.
Thank you, Lauren. Hi, everybody. My name is Nick Suarez. I am a senior at Bowdoin. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm an environmental studies and sociology major. And I'll pass it on to Lily.
Hi everyone, my name is Lily. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Rockland, Maine, and I'm an anthropology and environmental studies major. And I'll pass it off to Beckett.
Please. Hi everyone, my name is Beckett Slayton. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am currently in Brunswick and grew up down Route 1 in Blue Hill, Maine. And I am a government and environmental studies coordinate major at Bowdoin. I'll pass to Matt.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm a senior from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm an environmental studies and economics coordinate major.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. So now we'll start the presentation portion of this event. And then if you have any questions along the way, be sure to put them in the chat and we'll hopefully get to them at the end and throughout the event today. So our first and bravest soul to go is Nick. And Nick, take it away.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second to put up my slides, everyone. There we go. Can everybody see that? Cool. Yeah, thank you, Lauren, for moderating this conversation, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to be here. I know as Bowdoin students, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. I think a lot of the times we're very focused on what's going on campus and don't really get the chance to share what we're doing with the surrounding community, which is something that we've all tried to do in our work, definitely, but this is just another great opportunity. So thank you to CREA for letting us share this work and really have a two-way dialogue with the surrounding community about climate work and kind of the work we take on in Bowdoin as students. So I'm going to be talking about my climate work, which I primarily tackle through promoting alternative modes of transportation. So this is a picture of me. That's me biking on my way to Topsham. I had an internship there at the town of Topsham Department of Planning and Development. I'll talk about that in my presentation, but basically my climate work is really focused on promoting walking and cycling and public transit use as opposed to single car use. So I actually forgot to mention where I was from, which is convenient because I have a slide on it. I'm from Maryland, a town called Rockville, about 25 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And I thought this was good background just to tell everybody, because I feel like where I'm from really influences the work that I do in climate, in terms of, growing up near DC, and really being close to politics kind of shaped my view that I think we all have a voice, as residents of a community and as citizens. We can really influence the way our leaders make decisions. And so that's really kind of been a guiding principle, in terms of all of us having a voice. I think that's really important when we think about climate work and our individual impacts. But I actually didn't see myself doing climate work or environmental studies the whole time. In high school, I was actually interested in engineering. I was kind of fascinated by buildings and roads and bridges. So that kind of changed. I got accepted into Bowdoin, and people don't really come to Bowdoin to study engineering. So I had to kind of find something in the liberal arts that suited me. And so I was interested in the environment and kind of what we traditionally think of as climate work, environmental protection and preservation. But I also took some classes that kind of showed me that social aspects of sustainability were really important to how we conceive of sustainability. Not just making sure that resources are preserved and protected, but making sure that all groups in society benefit equally from a clean environment. I think just historically, there have been, like wealthier groups in the population have been able to benefit more from clean environments as opposed to lower income communities and communities of color. So that's really also been at the center of choosing transportation. I haven't really got a chance to delve into the economics. I think I'm lacking in that respect, but in terms of sustainability, it's really important to consider these multiple aspects, and not just the environmental, but also the social and economic. And that's kind of what's driven me to transportation. I think when I talk about transportation planning and what I'm interested in, it's really kind of the professions, both public and private, that make sure all of the transportation needs of a community are met. And so as you can see in this picture, people have the ability to walk, they have the ability to bike or take transit. And in like the environmental discourse, we hear a lot about like individual choices. And really, for example, everybody should be taking short showers. That's something like we hear in environmentalism a lot. Also, if you can, riding a bike and taking the bus to work. But, considering in a lot of places, you might not be able to do that. You might not be able to bike or take the bus to work because the infrastructure isn't there. So I kind of see transportation planning as kind of bridging that gap and making sure people are able to make those climate-friendly decisions by making sure that all of these facilities are available. The communities have bike lanes, bus routes, and I think that also ties well into the social aspects of it. There are very high costs associated with car ownership, with like insurance and making sure you have to be able to operate a motor vehicle physically, and just when you think about all the different populations that could benefit from walking, like the elderly and children. I think it just makes communities a lot more healthier when everyone's able to get around, and there are a lot of options for being able to get around. So kind of how this looks like on the ground is my first project that really got me interested in transportation planning was one here on campus. It actually concerned the intersection of Bath Road and Sills Drive, which is on the northeast of campus. Right as you're going to Cook's Corner, it's kind of the last stop of campus. And this intersection was kind of identified by the Bicycle Coalition of Maine as one where pedestrians felt unsafe. There would be a lot of speeding cars through this intersection. And actually there's a Bowdoin dormitory on the other side of the street. So it's really close to campus, the dormitory, but yet students will still be driving and taking their cars to campus. So that kind of got me interested in, well, how can we make this intersection more friendly to pedestrians and encourage people to walk? Because, that's obviously very important for reducing emissions. And so, yeah, with the help of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine and the town planners of Brunswick, you can see on the pictures to the left, we kind of set up some temporary cones, those little white things standing up. Those are called bollards. And that was essentially to raise the visibility of pedestrians in that intersection, kind of slowing cars down, making that turn. So they're more deliberate and making sure they're seeing pedestrians as opposed to just zipping through there. So that was the first project that I got involved in. And following that, I got an internship in the town of Topsham Department of Planning and Development to do an internship. And again, I chose to focus on transportation and really did a lot of outward facing projects in terms of creating websites for the town, because I think it's really important that these facilities are not just available for people, but that the public knowledge is there, that these facilities exist, and there's engagement and outreach to make sure that everybody knows these options are available. So this is just an image of one website that I created where I kind of mapped all of the sidewalks and bike routes and trails of the town in one very convenient graphic. And I'll actually include the link in the chat when I'm done presenting, because I know the Town of Topsham website isn't the friendliest, so it's a little hard to find on there. But I think this is a great resource for people to be able to visualize what kind of transportation options are available in town, and like parking lots and bike racks, and really be able to make the more conscious decision to maybe get out of the car and walk and bike if those facilities are available. And this slide is for maybe some of the younger people that are on this call. I was interested in engineering, I think because I loved math and I loved computer softwares. And I thought that maybe going to Bowdoin, I would lose some of these skills that you'd find maybe at like a university. But actually in transportation planning and urban planning, I've still had the option of doing really cool projects with different computer softwares. So this slide shows some work with geographic information systems. This project was essentially looking at the accessibility of alternative modes of transportation. So for example, on the left, you see that like rotating video there. And the green line is a trail network that a city has. And so we essentially do an analysis to show how people can walk to this trail network. And so the green areas show like if you're in a 5-minute walk to that trail network, and the yellow areas show, where people live, that's a 10-minute walk away. And so you can essentially compile this for, bus stops and train stations. And that's what you see on the right. It's called an accessibility surface. And that's essentially compiling all of these different alternative modes of transportation and assigning a value for how accessible these alternative modes of transportation are. So the darker areas would be where it's really convenient for people to walk to a train station, bus stops, and then the lighter areas and those missing any colors are, where it's a little more harder to walk to these facilities. And I think it's really important for the public to also have this information, not just, transportation planners. I think this is important for people when they're making decisions of where they want to live, how they can maybe live without a car, which might be increasingly important as, emissions and smog play a bigger role in cities. I think this kind of information is really important for residents to have in making climate-friendly decisions. And so this is my final slide of my presentation. I know it's a cliche, but the statement of think globally, act locally, but it's certainly rung true in terms of my transportation work. Transportation is, I think it's actually the biggest source of emission in the United States now. Before it used to be like industry, but now approximately 1/3 of the US's greenhouse gases comes from transportation. So it's really important that we make the changes in our local communities. And when we think about, driving, can we make the conscious effort to maybe walk and bike? And I think transportation planning is a way that at the community level, those changes, those personal choices are easier for people to make. And then finally, my second bullet point, that's kind of advice for the younger people as well, and everybody really, is to find your own ways to make an impact in the climate. I didn't really see myself getting into transportation at all, but that's kind of where my interest in environmental sustainability and social sustainability drew me to. But I think there's a lot of different avenues. If you're interested in economics or anything else, really, it can all tie into making positive climate work and ultimately achieving greater sustainability. And that's the end of my PowerPoint. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to pass it back to Lauren.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. And I think we're going to keep the train rolling and go to Lily, who's next.
Hi, everyone. Just give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see this? Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Lily. I use she, her pronouns, and this evening I'm going to be sharing my candid journey to how I got involved with climate work and a current project that I'm working on. Before jumping in, I wanted to provide a little bit of background about myself. So when I was 6 years old, my mom and I moved from California to Maine. We moved coast to coast from Mill Valley, California to Rockland, Maine. And for those who may not be familiar with Rockland, Rockland is a small coastal community in the mid-coast Maine region. And I was really lucky to have access to the ocean, to lakes and hills. And this is a picture of myself hiking in Camden Hills on the bottom here. And in this upper right corner, it's a picture of my mom and I walking on the Rockland Breakwater. And I attended Oceanside High School, which is a part of the RSU 13 district. Oops, let's see, how can I advance? There we go. So when I came to Bowdoin, I knew I had an interest in anthropology and cinema. And so I actually declared as an anthropology and cinema studies minor. And similar to Nick, I kind of stumbled upon environmental studies and climate work. So when I was a sophomore, I received a grant from the Career Center, and I was able to be a land steward for the Brunswick-Topsham Land Trust, which I know CREA has collaborated with many times and still continues to collaborate with. And last summer, I received a grant from the McKean Center, and I was able to take a virtual internship with the Climate Reality Project, which is a nonprofit organization that was started by former Vice President Al Gore. I specifically worked with the 100% Committed campaign, and this campaign works with different municipalities, businesses, and institutions to try to achieve 100% renewable electricity by the year 2030. And for this campaign, I worked on a toolkit that helped these different chapters and communities across the nation try to transition to renewable electricity in ways that were just. So up until this point, I wasn't really sure of what I wanted to study exactly, but this internship helped me realize that I definitely had a passion for climate justice. So to further explore my interest in climate justice, I decided to do a year-long project, which is still in the works, with Professor Eileen Johnson. And it centers around the primary question of how can Rockland collaborate with neighboring West Penobscot Bay communities to help prepare its people and maritime industries for climate change effects in ways that are as equitable as possible. So to answer this question, I decided to interview community members, and I analyzed blogs from different Mid-Coast Maine organizations. And I compiled all the responses into this chart, and I kind of categorized them into 3 different sections. And they all kind of have these central through lines, which are celebrating maritime people, industries, and histories, bolstering social and physical support systems, and co-hiring a regional grant writer and coordinator. So I'll pause here just for a moment for you guys to read a few of these community suggestions and ideas. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next slide, but if you have any questions about some of the community suggestions and ideas, please feel free to ask in the Q&A. So now I wanted to share a few quotes from different community members and organizations. The first one focuses on maritime people and industries, and it's from a blog by the Maine Coast Fishermen's Association. And this is an industry-based nonprofit that's based in Brunswick. And this organization created the Fishermen Feeding Mainers program, which addresses food insecurity. And the blog reads, "The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted many weaknesses within the nation's food system, but the most glaring to many in Maine was the fact that there are fish in the ocean, fishermen looking to work, and hungry people who are not able to get access to food." Another quote is from a schooner owner that operates out of Rockland. And they are also a father to a kid who is in the RSU 13 district. And they mentioned social support systems and specifically education. And the father said, it's dozens, literally dozens and dozens of families pay to have their kids go to Camden and the other public school 7 miles down the street. That's insane to me. I can get a school system of families that are financially able to be in that position. It's a bit of a shame. And the last quote I want to share with you is from a non-multi-generational Mainer and year-round resident. And they mention regional collaboration. And they say, I think it would be a good idea if there was a way for there to be joint communication and collaboration in terms of seeking grant money, in terms of perhaps hiring people if that's what's required, spread out the resources amongst other neighboring communities so that we can have something that's a little more unified rather than segmented by each individual community. So now I want to take a step back and share with you a little bit about the Maine Climate Council and the Mitchell Center. So the Maine Climate Council came out with a 4-year action plan for the state of Maine, and 6 different working groups came up with different policy recommendations for how Maine can mitigate and adapt to climate change effects. And the Mitchell Center conducted an equity assessment for the Maine Climate Council. And I'm adapting the Mitchell Center's equity assessment to reflect on some of the community suggestions and ideas. And Beckett can talk a little bit about the Maine Climate Council a little bit later in his presentation. And so I want you to walk away with 2 key topics. The first one is that climate action can take on many forms, but I think the important thing to keep in mind is that these have to be authentic to you and your interests. I can provide a few examples, such as supporting small businesses, donating your time or perhaps your resources to local schools or after-school programs, maybe offering knowledge that hopefully encourage other different communities to collaborate. And the second key takeaway is to try to broaden your understandings of community and climate adaptation. I think having a broader understanding and definition of community and climate adaptation can really help different communities and their leaders try to come up with alternative approaches that are a little bit more holistic and that focus both on physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedules to listen to the climate work that we are up to. And now I will pass it off to Lauren.
Thank you, Lily. That was awesome, awesome. I am next, actually, so I will share my screen. Let's see if I get this right. Can everyone see the screen? Okay, awesome. So, hello, everyone. Again, my name is Lauren Cafe, and I'm a junior at Bowdoin College studying government, environmental, and urban studies. And I'm really excited to talk with you all about my experience with climate change in Maine over the past few years. And my focus today will be specifically on building resiliency and connecting to a sense of place. So like I mentioned earlier, I lived in Illinois from the time that I was 6 until I graduated high school, but my family would always spend our summers in Maine, luckily enough. And when I started at Bowdoin, my mom decided she wanted to own her own bed and breakfast. And so we moved to Camden at the end of 2018. And that's really where my relationship and affinity with Camden really took off. And I would say that my connection with the environment has always been relatively strong because of my summer spent in Maine. And funnily enough, the right image shows a journal note I wrote when I was, I think, 9. And it talks about how I would stop the earth from being polluted. I would go on strike and I would make people use the swirly light bulbs in order to protect our environment. And so I think from a young age, I was somewhat aware of the issues of climate change in terms of pollution and energy, but environmental stewardship was never really a profession I knew existed, nor the thought that I would pursue really until the end of my senior year of high school. And so really only after my first year at Bowdoin and after spending a summer living and working in Camden, did I really become more aware of the challenges of climate change that are being felt in the present moment and the predictions for the future that are going to severely impact coastal communities that we all know and love in the state. And I've been witnessing the ways in which storm events would inundate or flood Harbor Park, downtown Camden, which is the image on the right. And it would overrun part of the beach, grass, and scenic walkways. And I would try to be walking my dog in a storm event, and it wouldn't happen. And so I started to become really curious about why these events were occurring and steps the town could take to prevent these matters. I just want to highlight on the left, this is predictions for sea level rise from the Maine Climate Council. And as you can see, even an intermediate low scenario of 1.6 foot sea level rise, which is what SLR stands for, will have serious impacts for coastal communities and working waterfronts, such as Camden. And so fast forward, during my sophomore year, I received a fellowship, sustainability fellowship from the Environmental Studies Department to work with the town of Camden and their planning board as a summer intern to try to incorporate climate change and sea level rise adaptation strategies, into their comprehensive plan. And a comprehensive plan is essentially designed to guide the future actions of a community. And Camden, prior to that, had no mention of climate change or sea level rise, which they thought was an important step to take. And so during the summer of 2020, despite being virtual, I researched and learned quite a bit about climate adaptation in the face of sea level rise and the steps that coastal communities in Maine have taken and can plan for those that have taken to plan for those predicted changes and current changes, honestly. And so that led me another step. So this is another candid kind of unexpected path of the past year. This led me to discover Geographic Information Systems, or GIS mapping. And I had been a bit afraid of it. So it's a computer science kind of term, and I had never been an extremely techie person, I would say. But I had learned the importance of maps in the planning department and the ways in which they can speak to people and speak to their sense of community and place, and really help visualize problems that can be comprehensive for any audience. And I decided to jump in on Professor Eileen Johnson's class called, very fittingly, Building Resilient Communities. And we looked at environmental problems through a spatial lens. And so that means that we picked a place that we had a special connection to, and for me, that was Camden, and identified environmental or social issues the town was facing and mapped those using GIS, which you can see in the bottom left corner of the screen. And so since I had formed such a deep connection with the town, I decided to look at how sea level rise will economically affect waterfront infrastructure, where a lot of residents and tourists spend their time and enjoy walking, and is really the heart of the community of the town. And I put all of this analysis into a story map. And if you know me, you know I love story maps. And this is a software that can help people tell meaningful stories and with maps and using data, and can help, especially help planners and policymakers use it for and in their communities. And so again, with the stepping stones, this work overlapped and kind of pushed me into research with the Collaborating Towards Climate Solutions team, which is also with Professor Eileen Johnson and a few other amazing people in the state of Maine. And this has been good work since the June of 2020. And we're essentially learning the challenges some of Maine's coastal communities are facing when it comes to climate change. And that can be anything from sea level rise to stormwater infrastructure, and really anything in between. And our goal is to provide technical assistance for those communities if they don't have the capacity to do so, and create connections between communities. So Lily and I have worked together, Camden and Rockland, kind of working to tag team some adaptation strategies for them. And so the hope is to make these communities more resilient. And resiliency, as I've kind of seen it, is the integrity of the town and the people's sense of place and connection doesn't change because the town becomes more equipped to handle potential problems and issues and disasters. So we never lose that sense of place and community. It just keeps kind of bouncing forward into more resiliency. So for example, Camden doesn't become flooded with water, but rises above the water. And so I will leave you all with one final note, which is kind of what my other two peers have said before me, but I think it's really important to find your niche. I believe that everyone in some shape or form has a relationship with the environment, and our own individual attachments to where you live and with your communities is a relationship with the environment, whether the environment is built or natural. And so I think it's really important to dig into that connection and that sense of place and think about where you want it to be in the next 5, 10, or 15 years. And if that's a resilient version, and is it something that we can work to plan for in the best of our abilities, and something we can provide for future generations to come. And so I think there's a lot of hope for the success, not only of Maine communities, but of the state and the world if we think of climate change like this. Everyone has a stake in some way that ties us to the environment. So with that, I will leave you all. Thank you very, very much. And I will pass it on to our final two, Matt and Beckett.
Hello, everyone. My name is Beckett.
And I'm Matt.
And we're going to talk a little bit today about our parallel sustainability and climate action journey through our time at Bowdoin. So I think we'll start off by saying, as it has been evident throughout these presentations before us, it's really important to highlight that climate action can take many different forms, and we need people in all spheres to be thinking about questions of climate change and the impacts that they will have on decisions and policies. And I think one of the great values of the Bowdoin Environmental Studies Department is that it allows students to really explore their own passions. And as Lauren said, to kind of find their niche and think about their passions in the context of the environment. And so, as I mentioned, we felt that our journey through Bowdoin have kind of run parallel courses, and we want to highlight the ways that our different passions have led to a collaboration together. And so here's a picture of Matt and I during our freshman year, as Matt is enjoying his first ever snowfall in Maine.
So I guess I'll start with from the beginning, pretty much. So I started my environmental studies journey in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I was born and raised. And I was so lucky to grow up surrounded by nature, living just 5 minutes from both the beach and the mountains. But I also grew up witnessing rapid urban development, unbearable automobile traffic, shorelines threatened by rising seas, and begging my mom to allow me to turn on the AC every day after school.
So I could not have grown up further from that. I grew up in Steuben and then Blue Hill, Maine, both coastal towns kind of hidden in the forest. And so I spent a lot of time outdoors and enjoying the Maine wilderness. I'm extremely thankful for my parents. They prioritized spending time outside and learning from nature. And so I really felt a deep sense of place to Maine. And when I got to Bowdoin and began to study environmental policy, I was really driven by this desire to preserve and protect my home state. And here's a picture of a younger me enjoying the sights on the top of Katahdin. So when I arrived at Bowdoin, I was really interested in public policy and thought that I might pursue a career in politics. But as I began to take courses, I became especially interested in environmental policy and realized that these questions of sustainability and climate action were really becoming pervasive in all forms of the policy arena. And I really sought out opportunities to explore these initiatives within my home state of Maine. And after my sophomore year, I was lucky enough to be granted a Maine-based fellowship through the Environmental Studies Department to work with a company called Coastal Enterprises, located just down the road in Brunswick. And when I took this position, I was completely unfamiliar with all the amazing work that Coastal Enterprises was doing, but I would soon learn that there was no better place to explore these interests of public policy and sustainable development here in Maine. So I worked on a variety of projects during my summer at CEI, but there was one that specifically spoke to me and really piqued my interest. And it was kind of a niche topic. I didn't even know that electric school buses were a viable option at the time, but they had read this report about a couple school districts across the US purchasing electric school buses and testing out their viability. And they wanted me to conduct some research on the policies and the funding that might enable Maine school districts to begin the process of adopting electric school buses. And obviously, due to the new technology, these school buses were extremely expensive compared to the standard diesel buses. And so I spent a lot of time reaching out to the school districts and the transportation departments of these various districts that had purchased these electric school buses to understand the policy mechanisms and the financing that helped them to purchase these vehicles. And then I spoke to a bunch of stakeholders within Maine, policymakers and organizations like the Nature Conservancy to understand how existing policies in Maine could help facilitate the adoption of electric school buses and how future policies might be shaped in order to drive this shift. And I just wanted to highlight here on the bottom of this slide, in January of 2020, the Bar Harbor School District, MDI High School, purchased the first electric school bus in the state. And so there's a long way to go in terms of understanding the viability of electric school buses, but I was really excited to see that school districts in Maine are beginning to take this step of testing out the alternative, and I think it's a really important way to drive sustainability in transportation.
So when I arrived at Bowdoin, I knew I was interested in studying environmental studies, but little did I know I would be diving headfirst into GIS software or going into the field to survey the salamander populations. But in the summer after my sophomore year, I got my first taste of urban planning at a Honolulu-based private company called Wilson Okamoto. And it wasn't until the summer after my junior year that I became involved within the local Maine community. And like Beckett, I got involved through a Maine-based fellowship, and I was placed at the town of Brunswick in their planning department. And at the town, I was involved in very diverse projects that included monitoring the town's conservation easements, seeding quahogs, surveying coastal bluffs, and tracking a living shorelines project. But my main project at the town of Brunswick worked on developing GIS maps and a priority matrix for the town's bicycle and pedestrian improvement plan update. So this is an example of a map I created during my time at the town of Brunswick. The colors on this map represent a scale of opportunities for improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and conditions, with the color red being of highest priority. And this map was used to develop planning area recommendations in the bicycle and pedestrian plan. So one of these high priority red lines is Bath Road, as you can see here. And this road is very problematic. After Mary Meeting Plaza and the Irving gas station, which is right here, heading east, there are 3 lanes of vehicle traffic without a bike lane. And this significantly hampers the safety of commuting bicyclists. And just the purpose of the map is to analyze, in the short term, the town could put shoulder lanes and paint sharrows, which are shared lanes between bicycles and cars, and install various signage alerting car drivers of potential bicyclists. And in the long term, the town can investigate the feasibility of reducing car lane width and speed to accommodate non-motorized vehicle users. And like I just mentioned, a long-term objective for this map is to provide a basis for the future development of transportation plans for bicyclists and pedestrians, or to assist in prioritizing bicycle and pedestrian improvement projects. So this project allowed me to work closely with the town planner and the Brunswick Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, also known as the BBPAC, which was very rewarding, and it allowed me to experience work behind the scenes at the town of Brunswick, and work with the people that are responsible for making the town run smoothly. And my hope going forward is that these maps are used to improve the safety and convenience of biking and walking and to get cars off the road. So after about a year of public meetings and work on this Brunswick Bicycle and Pedestrian Improvement Plan 2020 update, the plan's final draft is ready for a public hearing. So if you want to be involved, the BBPAC will hold a public hearing to take comments on and seek public approval of the plan. And this meeting will take place on Thursday, May 27th, 2021 at 5 p.m. on Zoom. And this electronic meeting information will be available on the Town of Brunswick's website closer to the meeting date. And once the public hearing is complete and the final updates have been made, the BBPAC will present to the town council for action. And the final draft of the plan and the story map can be found at the link provided here. And I guess if you have any questions, contact town planner Jared Woolston or planning assistant Laurel Marjoram for more information. And the town of Brunswick just looks forward to hopefully seeing some of you at the meeting.
So I'll kind of pick up where I left off. After I left CEI, I had developed this newfound passion for low carbon transportation policy, and I was especially interested in this topic in the context of Maine and how we could find innovative solutions given the rural nature of the state and the heavy reliance on personal vehicles. And luckily, this was a very opportune time to be interested in climate policy here in Maine. It was right after Governor Mills had announced the formation of the Maine Climate Council, and in order to develop policies to meet her ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals, the 80% by 2050. And I had the good fortune of being appointed as the youth representative on the transportation working group. And in this role, I attended monthly meetings to help develop transportation policies to meet these emission goals, specifically in the transportation sector. And this process was very fulfilling. I worked with a variety of stakeholders around the state, including legislators such as Brownie Carson, members of the Nature Conservancy, members of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, and together we had conversations about how to prioritize policies that would be most equitable and advantageous for the citizens of Maine. Ultimately, our proposal submitted to the Maine Climate Council centered around these three topics: accelerating Maine's transition to electric vehicles, increase fuel efficiency and alternative fuels, and reducing vehicle miles traveled. And so as the only youth voice on the transportation working group, I felt it was really important to engage with other youth activists in Maine so that my voice could represent more than just my own personal perspective. And I was really happy to find this organization, Maine Youth for Climate Justice, which is doing some great activism work around the state. And so I got involved with their organization and would fill them in on the meetings that we were having in the transportation working group and try to collect their feedback on the policies that youth in the state really wanted the members of the working group to prioritize. And during one of the meetings, we put forward a list of youth demands, and these were presented to the group. And here on this slide, it's probably a little hard to see, but this was a survey that we ran looking at some of the prioritization policies that the members of Maine Youth Climate Justice wanted to put forward. And from this engagement, what I took away from it was that the Maine youth were really oriented towards public transit adoption and trying to find ways to make rural public transit solutions viable in order to increase mobility. Obviously, as younger children, they might not have access to vehicles, and Maine is also a elderly state where a lot of people might no longer have access to a car. And so the youth really felt that in order to equitably improve access for all Mainers, focusing on increased public transportation was really important. And so that's something that I have carried with me as this is an ongoing process, the work on the Maine Climate Council, and I've tried to really push for public transportation adoption, even in the rural context.
So I guess I'll just continue where I left off as well. So this fall, I built off my work at the town of Brunswick, and I had the pleasure, like everyone else, of working with Professor Eileen Johnson to research bicycle and pedestrian policy and equity issues. So I explored the economic, environmental, and social benefits of a community achieving bike ped friendliness, as well as baseline characteristics of what makes a community bike ped friendly. So in this research, Brunswick, Bath, and Davis, California were used as case studies to find successful and ineffective bike ped policy, plans, and implementation strategies. And through this research, I found a large factor in promoting bike ped usage and improving infrastructure in small towns like Brunswick and Bath is to promote the bike ped culture to a point where it serves as a societal and social norm, especially on days like today when it's super nice out. And at that point, communities can use policies and funding that are more likely to benefit non-motorized transportation users.
So now we'll get into where our Bowdoin environmental studies journey have kind of collided this semester in the form of an independent study. So this fall, while I was thinking about my work on the Maine Climate Council and this focus on rural public transportation, I thought about Matt and the work he was doing on active transportation and bicycle and pedestrian work. And we discussed the potential of combining these two areas of interest into a semester-long independent study where we would examine the accessibility to public transportation networks using the town of Brunswick and Portland as our case study area. And so in this project, we sought to answer these three questions. What low carbon transportation infrastructure exists in Brunswick and Portland? What strategies can be implemented to create a multimodal low carbon transportation network? And how can policies promote equitable access to low carbon modes of transportation? And so one critical aspect of public transportation accessibility, especially in the context of a state that is so rural like Maine, is this idea of first and last mile access, which is the idea of, or the study of the modes by which people can get from their homes to public transit stops or public transit stations. And so by understanding local bicycle and pedestrian networks, we hoped to understand who in a community such as Brunswick relies on a car to access public transportation infrastructure, and who has the ability to conveniently walk and bike to a stop. And again, this kind of gets at this multimodal transportation network where the goal is that we can limit the reliance on personal vehicles and really incentivize alternative modes of transportation, whether that be cycling and walking or public transportation modes such as public buses and trains.
So this map is an example of how we're trying to tie in existing public transportation infrastructure with walkable, bikeable, and automobile access. So this GIS map shows how far an individual could travel in Brunswick from each Brunswick Explorer bus stop in 10 minutes on foot, bike, or by car. And this map points out inequities in access to public transit in Brunswick, where many of the low-income, minority, and rural populations are unable to conveniently access the bus for essential transportation. And we are currently working to finish our project that points out connectivity and mobility issues, not only in Brunswick, but throughout the entire US. And we hope that by adding to this literature, will help to increase active transportation, reduce carbon emissions, and provide equitable ways of travel for everyone. And Beckett and I were just inspired by our previous transportation work, both at Bowdoin and in the Maine community. And we wanted to finish our year by creating something very meaningful to us. And we hope this project can live past our time at Bowdoin to benefit the residents of Brunswick and Portland. And that's all. Thank you very much for coming.
With that, we'll toss it back to Lauren.
Awesome job, everybody. Okay, so I think we're going to go, I'll ask a few questions, about 3 or 4, and then 1 or 2 of you guys can answer the first 3, and then we can all say where we're going next with this. And then we'll open it up we have some questions in the chat I can see, and then we can open it up more for a discussion if that sounds good with everybody. So the first question that we have, I'll switch to my notes here. And again, it can be 1 or 2 of us, it doesn't have to be all of us to answer this. Did anything surprise you in your climate work?
I guess I can start with this one. So just working with the town planner and the entire Brunswick Planning Department and the BB Pack, I was surprised how engaged everyone was with bicycle and pedestrian work. And the entire BB Pack committee are all volunteers, and they dedicate long hours of their precious time just to improve safety conditions for everyone in Brunswick while reducing emissions. So this was just eye-opening and a great surprise for me to find.
I think going off of that and the enthusiasm that people have for walking and biking, I think the biggest surprise for me is how much like environmentally friendly transportation actually like coincides with community needs. I think a lot of times people think that to be environmentally friendly, you have to make some sort of sacrifice, whether you're sacrificing like your quality of life or the resources that you use on a daily basis. But I think, when we think about like walking and biking, I think that's what everybody wants in their community. Like when we think about why Brunswick's Main Street is so great, it's because you're able to walk and bike there and not necessarily be dependent on a car. So you don't necessarily have to make sacrifices in being more environmentally friendly for transportation. I think being environmentally friendly could also increase quality of life in that way. And that's been very pleasant, kind of finding out and optimizing is really important.
One thing that surprised me is that I was asking interviewees about physical infrastructure and what could be done in communities to try to bolster their waterfronts. But I found out that everybody was emphasizing the importance of social infrastructure. And so that kind of surprised me, but I realized, so to echo Nick, the benefits of different types of like soft capital and soft structuring that can really benefit communities. And it doesn't have to look like traditional seawalls or other types of technologies that we conventionally associate with climate adaptation.
Nice, thank you guys. I'll move on to the next question. Where do you see the most opportunity for progress in climate work based on what you've encountered so far?
I'm happy to hop in on this one. I think one area that Lily has really touched on and Matt and I have tried to consider in our project as well is this idea of equity and how we can make sure that as we find climate solutions that everyone is served equally and that we prioritize underserved communities as we seek these solutions. I think there's a lot more talk about these things in various areas, but I think it's a really important opportunity in the context of transportation, for example. Not only can we reduce emissions, but we can ensure that our the most underserved portions of our community have even greater access to transportation infrastructure. So I think focusing on equity is really important, and there's a lot of room for improvement in that area.
I would say for me personally, I think a lot of progress can happen at the local level. I think climate change can often seem a very daunting issue when we think globally the change that needs to occur. And so I find a lot of inspiration and motivation for local projects and adaptation especially. And also that connection, finding kind of connections with everybody to the environment and what they're passionate about, and seeing how we can make it, like my peers have said, equitable and not changing life, as we know it, but making it better, I think is definitely a good way to market, hopefully, the future of our planet. Does anyone else want to hop in on this question before I move to the next one? No? Okay. The next one is, what are you most hopeful about?
I can start off with this one. I think one thing that I'm hopeful about is the current Biden-Harris administration's potential infrastructure plan. I think this provides opportunity for different states and different communities to really try to reconsider what is infrastructure. So just trying to grapple with that question, I think, is really, really cool.
It's a good point, Lily. I think similar to that kind of, what am I most hopeful about? I think going off of what Lily said and Beckett, I think equity is really front and center right now in terms of almost like a lot of professions, and not just, transportation, but I think like the events of the past year have revealed a lot of injustices. And it's great that equity has really become front and center for a lot of different fields. And now it's really important that we keep working on that and keep that front and center, especially in climate change and climate work. That's really important.
Okay, I'll move on to the last question to make sure that we have time for everyone else's, and everyone can answer this one. Where are we going from here? So what's the next? The big question. What's the next steps?
I can go
Not
first.
going anywhere. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm a senior, so I'll be graduating in a few short weeks, which is very hard to believe. And in the short term, I have accepted a job working for an environmental nonprofit called CDP that is working to help companies and cities account for their greenhouse gas emissions so that they can work towards carbon neutrality goals. And so most of my work will be around messaging and kind of driving environmental disclosure. And for the time being, that is remote. So I will happily be staying in Maine for at least one last summer. That I'm super excited about that. And I hope to continue my work here in my home state. As I mentioned, it's been really fulfilling to be able to grow up in Maine and now do meaningful climate work here throughout my time at Bowdoin. So I hope that can continue into the future.
I guess I can go next. I'm also a senior and have a few short weeks of undergrad college left. Just trying to soak everything up. And in the fall, I will be going to Cornell for my master's in city and regional planning. And in a future career as a planner, I just hope to promote active transportation in my hometown of Honolulu.
I could go next because I think my future's looking kind of similar to Matt. I also got accepted into an urban planning program. I'll be doing my master's at the University of Southern California. So I will be moving to Los Angeles, which will be very different, obviously from Maine, but also from Maryland, which I'm used to. But I think I just want to keep, advocating for alternative modes of transportation. I think in Los Angeles, car usage or using the vehicle is like very prominent in life there. And I'll always keep that in the forefront of my mind, thinking about how we can make transportation more environmentally friendly.
I can go next. I'm also senior, and although I don't know exactly what the next chapter of my life will be after Bowdoin, I do know that I really enjoy working with small communities, and so I hope that I can carry this forward with me wherever I end up.
I'm not sadly, I guess you guys make me sad. I'm junior. So I have one more year left at Bowdoin, but this summer I will be working with the National Wildlife Federation on none other than story mapping on natural disasters and their effect on wildlife. So I'm going a little bit bigger than local, but hopefully we'll settle local one day. The plan. Okay, so those are that's the end of our discussion, questions, presentations. And so I'm not sure how we're doing on time, Caroline, if we have time to answer the questions in the chat, because we have a few, or the next steps here. I think we can probably answer some questions. I'm guessing. We want to do that? Okay. I can just start up at the top. So it sounds like town planning boards have a key role in preparing for climate change. And do you all think that they prioritize this versus short-term economics? And do they have the right tools to do so? Good question.
I can try to answer that question first. It is a really good question. And I don't know if anyone's like figured out that balance exactly of prioritizing long-term environmental benefits and short-term economic gains. I think definitely that's like a debate that is going on around the country. I think like when you think about the Green New Deal, for example, that obviously has a lot of environmental benefits, but gets a lot of criticism for maybe the initial investment you have to put in, and a lot of like economic cost up front. So I think just in answering that question, I think it's important to try to find environmental friendly changes that you can make that actually do benefit short-term economics. For example, like I think climate change adaptation, like most of Lily's presentation centered about, is really important to making sure coastal towns keep their, like bays and harbors functioning to the same level that they always have been. Like I mentioned, Brunswick's Main Street, going back to the idea of transportation, like walking and biking is really important to downtown Brunswick. So I think there's climate work that can align with short-term economic growth.
I think I can kind of branch off of that and talk about the right tools. It is difficult, especially in smaller towns, that a lot of the members of the governance structures there wear a lot of hats, and so to have the capacity to focus on something as that can be very technical as climate change adaptation without that capacity is difficult, and so oftentimes it can be pushed aside for those short-term economic goals and things that the town needs. And especially in the time of COVID, there's a lot of just moving parts with that. And so I think that moving forward, and Lily might have pointed this out in her research, having towns appoint research grant writers and capacity builders and climate change technical assistant work would be very helpful, I think, in prioritizing that climate change adaptation work to hopefully make it both a short-term economic but also long-term economic investment for the town as well. Okay, I can move on. Does anyone else want to jump in on that question? No? Okay, I'll move on to the next one. So from Carol mentioned that COVID reduced our travel substantially, and Zoom introduced us to alternative ways to socialize, work, and hold meetings. Do you feel we will sustain that reduction in travel to the benefit of the planet or not?
I can start us off here. This is something that we talked about a lot during our transportation working group meetings, the idea of telework and telemedicine in particular. And I think that this does give us concrete evidence that these things are possible. And you know, we have considered pushing for ideas such as shortening the work week to four days from the office and adding a day from home. And so I think that these kind of innovative solutions are definitely going to be part of the solution in the future. Having said that, in a state like Maine, we have to be really cognizant of the access to broadband and again, make sure that everyone has access to these resources and that we're not leaving people behind that might not have the technology or resources to do these things. But I do think that it's really encouraging and there's no doubt that schools and workplaces have much more competency in dealing with online technology and using Zoom or using Teams. And I think that can be very beneficial in the future.
And I can add some thoughts there as well. This is also something I've thought a lot about. And I think piggybacking off of what Beckett was saying, definitely like COVID gave us the opportunity to think about telework as like a very viable and climate friendly option. But I think that's only refers to teleworking. I think like at the same time, a lot of us are like dying to go back to normal life and like go out and be out in the town. And so I think like those trips, like going to the grocery store, obviously those trips don't go away. Maybe commuting is reduced substantially, but there are definitely like those other services that people still need. And I think like maybe like telecommuting or commuting goes down. But for example, I feel like during the pandemic, delivery and like freight vehicles really went up as people are, you know, not going out, but instead ordering from home and using Amazon a lot. I know I am. So that's like definitely another transportation challenge that we have to think about.
Thank you, guys. I'll move on to the next question here. What's the message from Sue? What's the message for us older people? What should we be doing to address climate change?
I can start us off with this a little bit and then people can hop on. I think just showing up and being present like you all are doing and taking time out of your schedules to come listen to some college students is great. So I think just trying to participate and engage in your community and to really try to support and listen to different youth in your community is really important.
Yeah, I think going off of Lily, a lot of the work that we've done has been on the ground, talking to people and talking to them about their experiences. And I think the old generation is the most experienced and the most wise out of all of us. And so the knowledge that you have of your environments and what life was like growing up and how things are different, might be different now, is such a valuable tool. I think knowledge is invaluable. And so yeah, again, just being here today and asking questions and sharing, you know, experiences and being willing to talk to us younger people, I think is amazing. So
I also would just say to reiterate something that was brought up in the earlier questions. I think that community level action is really, really important, and resources are often lacking. And I think that when you are able, and if you do have the ability to, you know, educate yourselves on these things and get involved at the local level to raise awareness about sea level rise and the impacts it might have on your local businesses and the local economy, it's really valuable. You know, the more people are aware of these things, the more towns are able to plan for them, and I think that's really important moving forward.
Also, just going to add just things as little as attending the town halls or going to advisory committee meetings and just speaking your voice and your input for the local community.
Awesome. Thank you. I think we have a question that might be directed at Matt and Beckett. What has happened to the Breeze bus to Portland? Do we know?
Yeah, so we have included the Breeze bus in our analysis. We just didn't show it tonight. But yeah, to my knowledge, it's still up and running.
Yeah, I mean, we're including it in our project, so I hope it's still running.
I know of a few people who are still using it for transporting back and forth between Brunswick and Portland, so it is still in use.
Nice. Does anyone have any thoughts about a price on carbon?
I can speak a little bit, I guess. It is something that the Transportation Working Group has talked a lot about, especially in the context of transportation. There's an initiative that a bunch of Northeast states are signing on to try to put a price on transportation, fuel, and gas. And so I think in a state like Maine, there's a lot of hesitancy to use that approach, given how much of our economy is driven by fuel and by fossil fuels, whether it be trucking or you know, our sorry, for like the forestry industry. And obviously everyone is very dependent on personal vehicles. And so a lot of the conversations that we have had surrounding a price on carbon are talking about how we have to ensure that we have viable and equitable alternatives to using like combustion engines. And so, you know, obviously the high price point on electric vehicles can often be a barrier for a lot of people. And if we transition to a price on carbon where the people with electric vehicles will see that advantage and not have to pay that high premium, but not everyone has access to electric vehicles, that can be a big problem. So again, I think focusing on things like increasing public transportation, pushing for active modes of transportation, these can kind of help bridge that gap, but we have to be really careful about who is going to pay the biggest price for this carbon, and you know, who will be left behind if we do these things, and where will the, you know, assuming that this is a tax, where will this money be redistributed, and are there ways to prioritize low income and equitable distribution of the revenue that supposedly would be generated from a tax like that.
I want to jump in and just, I know that all of you have very busy academic lives to get back to. And I just want to highlight for our audience that, you know, these 5 students did this presentation, you know, on top of all of their regular work. And we're so appreciative of you sharing your stories and your work with us. It's really inspiring. And it's too bad that, you know, Beckett, you've got a job and 2 of you are going off to grad school, but I'm sure there might be some job offers waiting for you out there in the audience. It's really impressive that the work that you've done. And actually one of our commenters, Eric, says, this is a really interesting idea that said you should all apply to the planning boards in your hometowns. Planning boards attract good people and they often need energy like yours. So a very civic suggestion, but there's lots of kudos in the chat box. So be sure to, all 5 of you should take a look at that. So we really appreciate your sharing all of this fantastic work that you've been doing with CREA and our audience. We have recorded it, and so we'll be putting it up on our website. And we often find that a lot of the people who registered and weren't able to come, will send the link to them, and we find that a lot of people view them. So So thank you all again, and thanks to everybody for coming and listening. And I hope everyone feels inspired to go and get involved in their communities and beyond, and supporting there's so many ways to get involved in climate work, because it's such a broad, it really affects everything. So lots of ways to get involved, and thank you for sharing all of your work and inspiration. So have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, take care.
Bye.